Texas, the first ever documented black-eyed kid encounter in 1996. Children are creepy in any context, true. So any urban legend including black-eyed children is bound to turn some heads. In the late 90s, a journalist named Brian Bethel was working in his town of Abilene, Texas, when he encountered something that he'll remember until his last day. He was parked outside a movie theater when two children knocked on his window. For reasons he couldn't understand, he was completely gripped with fear. He rolled down the window and the kids asked for a ride back to their house so they can get cash for the movie. His fear made him hesitate, but the kids were persistent. They kept saying weird things like they weren't armed or anything. Once Bethel looked back at the kids, he was terrified to see their eyes had turned pitch black. They started screaming at him that they could only come in the car if he invited them in, and he quickly drove away. Smart. As a journalist, he spread the word and was surprised when other people wrote back saying they had experienced something similar. No thanks.
You ever heard of black-eyed children, those little demon creatures? Well, they stalked me. This is such a wild story, but I absolutely have to tell it. So some years back, I was living in a really unique living situation. I was living in a national park. It only had room for the caretaker, but it was a duplex, so he ended up turning it into a rental unit. And I moved into there with my son. This decommissioned lighthouse was part of this national park, and it was right there on like a cliff peninsula in San Diego, right on the San Diego Bay. And so while you're like right there in the bay, you're still pretty isolated out there. And it was a very creepy location, not least of all because you have to drive through an extensive military cemetery to get there. But basically the park, like any national park, closes at sunset, but this especially closed at 5, and after that I would have to get in through a really rusty gate. I think it was pretty corroded because of the sea air. There wasn't much to be done about it, but it did make it a security concern when I would come home late at night and my little clicker wouldn't work. I used to MC karaoke, and so it wasn't unusual for me to get home at like 12:30, 1 a.m. I was already anxious to get home that night, but then of course, the gate was not working, and I kept clicking it because boy, did I not want to get out that night. I was like, open up, you rusty bitch, but it never did, and so I knew that was it. I was gonna have to get out and do it manually. And I'm kind of bathing the whole thing in my headlights so that I can see the pin pad because I'm old and my eyes aren't working like they used to. So as I'm trying to figure it out, I hear this odd little voice say, "Ma'am, can you help us?" And I say odd because not only was it a child's voice, but it was kind of robotic, devoid of personality. Already so caught off guard. I mean, this was so unusual. We were way up there on a cliff. There is no way some kid could have just come gallivanting up. And it was hours after closing, so they couldn't have been left there by their parents. Just none of it. So as I'm looking around trying to identify where this voice came from, I start hearing the rustling in the leaves. And this voice says again, "Can you help us?" And I'm like, us? Like one wasn't enough. So I identify where it's coming from. I look, and there are indeed 2 little freaking kids wearing hoodies, and even weirder, they're wearing sunglasses. Dude, it's like 12:30 at night, right? I was like, "Where are your parents?" They ignored me and said, "Let us in," at the same time. I said, "Let you in where?" And she hisses, "Anywhere." Now, before you say anything, I do have a maternal instinct. I do have a child of my own. And at any other point in my life, or even that day, I would have been happy to try and find their parents. But when I tell you that something about them was so off that I felt genuinely frightened. They were affectless, like robots, like automatons, just kind of standing there droning on. I was at a loss, and I was kind of in a whole fight or flight situation. And to my great relief, suddenly some headlights started bouncing up the hill behind me, which was very, very odd. No one lived up there except for me and the old caretaker, but I did not care. I was just so happy for the distraction. But wildly enough, while they had been rustling on the way in, they didn't make a noise on the way out, because when I looked around, they were completely gone. So I get home and I call the cops just in case some strange little children had been left there. But they never found anybody. Now, I do wish this was the end of my story, but it is certainly not. They became a plague for me and my son, and with them came pestilence and nightmares, and we feared for our life. There is a whole story about these black-eyed children. Part 2 of being stalked by black-eyed children while I lived at a national park. So the very next day after that last encounter from the last video, while I didn't see the children again, they certainly never left my life. The very next morning, I was just doing dishes when suddenly I look down into the drain and I see something black and slimy crawling out from the depths. I screamed. I looked back in. It was a frickin' centipede. Up until that moment, I had never seen one of these in real life, but there it was, acting like my sink was its home and crawling around being gross. My super tough, non-squeamish roommate got rid of it, only for there to be about 15 later on just crawling all over each other, disgusting, in the sink. But that wasn't the end of it. Suddenly, we had cockroaches, we had ants en masse, we had a bunch of ravens outside of the house all the time. It was just bizarre. There were rats squeaking around. This was a completely clean household. I'd never had issues like this before until this encounter with these kids. So a little background for you. We had moved to the Lighthouse and to San Diego from North Carolina only something like 6 months before, and it had been a pretty tough move for my 9-year-old son. He was having a hard time making friends, and he's not weird, but he is different. He kind of has, I guess, a connection with the paranormal. He literally sees dead people, and I think that has kind of made it hard for him to connect with the living children, because there's kind of a haunted quality about him. And so we've been here for all these months, and he had been unable to make any sort of friends, and it was terribly sad. So one night when he came up to me and said that he had met some kids at the Lighthouse, and that they really wanted to hang out that night, I was initially very thrilled. But I started getting some red flags when he was saying stuff like they really thought our living situation was cool and they really wanted inside our house. It was something about that phrasing that just kind of made my blood run cold. So I was like, if these were people visiting, they're probably not going to come back, because this is a national park. You go once or twice, you bring tourists from out of town, you come in from out of town, and that's about it. You go on field trips. Like, there was no way that these kids were going to be coming back. And he said, no, they're always at the park, especially at nights, and they really want to come in. To which I said no, because I was freaked out and he was sad, but I was hoping that would be that. That wasn't that. They are there every night. That evening, I heard a strange sound from his room, like a scratching. So I go in there and he is completely fast asleep, and there's nothing in the room. So I leave again. The moment I set foot out of the room, I start hearing this deep etching sound again. I was very scared. I ran back in. It was gone again. I realized it was coming from the window. That's scary enough before you consider the fact that we were on the 2nd floor. I thought, maybe it's a tree branch. Maybe it's a bird. And when I looked out the window, I saw some form scurrying across the yard, so fast that I could barely make out anything other than that it was a small child. Compounding situations like this, I started having the nightmares, and they were more vivid and horrifying than any nightmare that I have ever had before or since. It was always that there was somebody knocking at the door, demanding to get in, and that I would try and get to the door, but I would have to go through this hallway that was literally dripping with blood and muck and gore, and I would be stepping in it. It would be squishy, it would be tactile, it would be viscous, and then there would be bugs. There would be bugs crawling in this mess as I was trying to get to this door to open it. And then, as time went on and the nightmares continued, it started escalating because I started sleepwalking, which really was a very scary proposition considering we were at the top of a cliff. and I seemed to have no idea where I was going or what I was doing. At this point, I was scared enough to truly start investigating the origins of these little creatures or what had happened in this national park before I got there with its hundreds of years of history. And boy, did I come up with a lot of information and quite the story, and also a lot of fear. What I found was frightening.
Y'all want to hear a story? And this story is going to take us to Abilene, Texas, the location of the first U.S. encounter with entities known as the Black-Eyed Children. And they are creepy. The Black-Eyed Children, or Black-Eyed Kids, are what looks like little kids with completely blacked out eyes, like this dude right here. Like no pupil, no iris, no whites of the eyes, just blacked out. Encounters with these black-eyed children have been reported all over the world, but the first documented encounter here in the US was in 1996 when a man named Brian Bethel encountered two kids. And he claimed he had pulled over near the Westwood Theater. He was sitting there writing a check out of his checkbook when he heard a knock at his driver's side window. He looked up and seen two kids standing there, which appeared to be about the ages of 9 and 13. Both boys, both wearing hoodies, and they had their hoods kind of, pulled up to obscure their faces a little bit. And they asked if he would give them a ride to their mother's house because they wanted to get money to see a movie. But that's when he noticed their eyes, completely blacked out, no whites to be seen. It said he got a very sick and eerie feeling. And as if sensing his fear, these boys started to get more aggressive. The older one started pounding on his window, saying, "We can't come in your car until you invite us in. Let us in." Well, at this point, this man was over it. He threw his car in reverse and got out of there with the boys still yelling, "Let us in," behind him as he drove away. Some people claim that this actually isn't the first encounter with black-eyed children, it's just the first documented one. And that some people had a few encounters in the 80s, but it just didn't get recorded. But after this encounter, there was a massive uptick in the number of sightings seen in the United States. In 2012, he appeared on the TV show Monsters and Mysteries in America and told the story too. And following that, many more people came forward with their encounters. This is apparently also a very common phenomenon in the UK. And in September of 2014, a British tabloid ran a story about a shocking rise in sightings in England and all over the world. It said these kids usually appear in twos and generally appear to be between the ages of 6 and 16. They have pale skin and blacked out eyes. And these kids, whenever they appear, usually start with a request. A ride home if you're in a vehicle, or to come in and use your phone to call their parents if you're in your house. And they usually start out asking pretty polite. But if you were to say no, some of them will begin to plead and beg, but others will get angry and demand to be let in. Instead, if you encounter one, they seem to have a strange power over you, as if they can exert some kind of subtle influence on the mind. Because despite an immediate reaction of fear and dread, which is always reported, you'll catch yourself like reaching for your car door or widening your door without realizing that you're doing it. And most people that encounter these kids don't let them in the house or their car. But one snowy night in January of 2016 in Vermont, one couple did. This couple said that a boy and a girl knocked on their front door, and they asked to come inside, saying that their parents would be there to pick them up soon. The woman immediately felt bad for these kids because it was freezing cold and snowing outside, so she let them in. They then sat on the couch, and her husband tried to speak to them and ask them questions, and they wouldn't really meet his eyes. Well, then one of them asked if they could use the restroom. And the woman was like, "Yes, it's over there." And that's when she seen their eyes as they were walking away. Well, she turned to her husband and was like, "Did you see their eyes?" And he had his hand up to his face. He pulled his hand away and it's just blood everywhere, where he got this sudden, terrible nosebleed. And right at that very moment, the power went out. And the kids reappeared and said, "Our parents are here." The kids walked out the door, leaving it hanging open. And the woman said that she's seen two very tall, very slender men standing at the end of the driveway waiting. So she kind of waved at them, and they did not wave back, and they all piled in one car and drove away. Shortly after they left, the power came back on. Over the next week, several strange things kept happening to them. The couple had 4 cats. 3 of them went missing, and one of them was found deceased in a pool of blood. And the husband kept having these reoccurring nosebleeds. So he went to the doctor and was diagnosed with a rare aggressive skin cancer. And by the end of that week, the woman started experiencing the same nosebleeds. And she stated that she fully believes that her and her husband's failing health was due to letting the black-eyed children inside her home. But what are these black-eyed children? Some have called them children of the devil. Some people think they're demons. Some people think they're aliens. Others say they're vampires, but no one really knows for sure. Only thing that's fully known is that if 2 of these kids ever come knocking on your front door wanting in your house, don't let them in. Have any of y'all ever had an encounter with the black-eyed children? Let me know.
If you see black-eyed children, don't let them in.
When I encountered black-eyed children, I did not let them in. Didn't make any noise, didn't open the door, nothing. But they still knew that I was there. The story starts in this creepy ass North Texas house. I've spoken briefly about this house before. I even uploaded a video to YouTube about some of the things that I experienced here, but I've never shown it, and I do feel like it helps to have this visual while I tell the story. Quick side note, I have no fucking idea what this is. I'm gonna take y'all back to 2011 right quick. I was always the first one who made it home from school. My mom told me, get your ass in the house, shut the door, lock the door, don't open the door for nobody, period. So I'm in the back of the house and I'm watching TV, and I had to have been there for a couple hours, right? So this happened early evening at the latest. So I'm at the back of the house watching TV, listening to music, whatever, and I hear a faint knock. So I pause the TV and I get up to go and see who's at the door. I was not supposed to open it, but I was just curious as to who it was. So I'm walking through the dining area and I stand at the doorway to the living room, which is a little bit behind this window right here. And I'm standing there a little bit confused because I'm like, who is knocking at the door? Now, while I'm standing there, I hear another knock. So I decide I'm going to tiptoe to the door and peep through the peephole and see who it is. So I tiptoe to the door, but before I can say anything or look through the peephole or anything, I hear, "Can I come in?" Real quick before I get into that, the first thing that I noticed when I walked
Do I have any tips on the black-eyed children? Yes, I do. No matter what they say, no matter how much they beg, no matter what, never let them in your car.
I know I look crazy, but not crazier than what I'm about to say. Those TikToks of people talking about they seen people with black eyes. One lady saw that black-eyed man in the grocery store, and then another man I just saw said that he saw somebody walking behind him with black eyes. I've encountered the same type of experience, not once, but multiple times. Before I even go into the detail in the story, that I want y'all to know that these are demons, and demons do possess people, period. Y'all know I used to work as a spicy dancer, and I was in a club one time. It's normal to have creepy guys kind of follow you around because they want to dance or want to buy you a drink or, you know, whatever. I'm not thinking too much of it, but after seeing this dude kind of creepily follow me around, I finally sit down with him at the bar, and we're having a drink, and we're talking, and I noticed he was doing a constant like sign on my leg. Like he did it like 3 or 4 times, and even though at the time I wasn't spiritually that sensitive because I was doing so wrong, I'm like, what are you doing? My discernment went off, and it wasn't even strong then. And I basically was like, he's trying to curse me. And I tell y'all, I looked him dead in his face and I said, the blood of Jesus. When I tell you, his eyes went pitch black. Now, I'm not talking about, no, I thought I saw it. No. Eyes went pitch black. He pulled his shirt down and he had literally a Satanist tattoo right on his chest. I got so scared, I knocked my drink over and I kind of held my composure. But when I tell you, I was shaking. He laughed and I got up and I walked away. Demons are real. They are out here. They will try to target you. They will try to scare you. People don't believe you when you say you see these things, but these things are real. I want y'all to know this. The spiritual realm is more gangster than the physical, okay? And once you realize that, you will never ever think it's a hallucination or you just heard something. Time is dwindling down into the rapture and God not playing. So seeing these things daily is going to start happening because that thin line between the physical realm and the spiritual realm is thinning out like super much. So y'all just stay prayed up for real. I love y'all and so does Jesus.
If you see black-eyed children, don't let them in.
When I encountered black-eyed children, I did not let them in. Didn't make any noise, didn't open the door, nothing. But they still knew that I was there. The story starts in this creepy ass North Texas house. I've spoken briefly about this house before. I even uploaded a video to YouTube about some of the things that I experienced here, but I've never shown it, and I do feel like it helps to have this visual while I tell the story. Quick side note, I have no fucking idea what this is. I'm gonna take y'all back to 2011 right quick. I was always the first one who made it home from school. My mom told me, get your ass in the house, shut the door, lock the door, don't open the door for nobody, period. So I'm in the back of the house and I'm watching TV, and I had to have been there for a couple hours, right? So this happened early evening at the latest. So I'm at the back of the house watching TV, listening to music, whatever, and I hear a faint knock. So I pause the TV and I get up to go and see who's at the door. I was not supposed to open it, but I was just curious as to who it was. So I'm walking through the dining area and I stand at the doorway to the living room, which is a little bit behind this window right here. And I'm standing there a little bit confused because I'm like, who is knocking at the door? Now, while I'm standing there, I hear another knock. So I decide I'm going to tiptoe to the door and peep through the peephole and see who it is. So I tiptoe to the door, but before I can say anything or look through the peephole or anything, I hear, "Can I come in?" Real quick before I get into that, the first thing that I noticed when I walked
called I Thought That the Black-Eyed Children Were Just an Urban Legend.
Oh, I love the black-eyed children.
Until I met one. This is a true story by a guy who ran a paranormal YouTube channel. I don't know his name, but his friends were called Sam and Becky. Okay? This is it's mental. Okay. And it takes place at Cannock Chase, which is right by where I live.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cannock Chase.
If you've ever heard of Cannock Chase in the United Kingdom, then you've probably also heard a lot of ghost stories surrounding it. It is supposed to be. I've been on Cannock Chase. It's spooky as fuck. Most famous one, however, has to be about the black-eyed children of Cannock Chase. I've heard of this before. It's totally true. I had heard a lot of the stories but never really believed in it myself. Me and my friends Sam and Becky, we run a fairly successful paranormal YouTube channel. We mostly film around the West Midlands and in haunted locations. We mainly do stuff like using a Ouija board, asking spirits to communicate with us and pretending like we're making contact with them. Me and Becky will be the people on the channel who go out and try and communicate with the spirits, and Sam is the cameraman who occasionally throws a rock in the background so we can all go, what was that?
Oh, but these need to be our new best friends.
Yeah, I love them, sound great. We were celebrating our 4th anniversary of doing this YouTube channel and we wanted to do a special video. Living in Wolverhampton, Cannock Chase is about a half-hour drive away, so it made sense to do it in such a popular location. We arrived there dead on midnight and filmed for a few hours with nothing happening. During our usual Ouija board ritual, we called on the black-eyed children to make contact with us. We mocked and imitated them, making contact with us, and even had Becky act like she had been possessed. When we were finished, we decided to head back to our car. Sam was going to take the footage home with him to edit. When we arrived at our car, Becky noticed a couple of kids. He must have been no older than 15. They were slowly making their way to the car. Sam made a comment about how it was kind of ironic and a little bit creepy, but we got in our car and drove off without waiting to see what they wanted. I know, it's kind of an asshole thing to do, but we didn't want to become the victims of a robbery or... I mean, just leave. Just go. Stark. Go. You've got no idea. The next night, I was lying in bed when all of a sudden, my dog started to go absolutely crazy downstairs. I went down to see what was going on. As I got closer, I remembered this immense feeling of terror coming over me. My dog was facing the door, hackles up. There was a knock at the door. I looked out of the window and I immediately felt sick to my stomach. 2 children, one boy around 15 and one girl who must have been no older than 11 was standing outside. "You must let us in," the boy said. "We need to call our mother." The way he spoke was not typical of children from Wolverhampton at all. He sounded posh, but something was off in the tone. I can't quite make out what, though. "Why do you need to call your mum?" I asked. "Why do you need to call your mum?"
Is that the Wolverhampton accent?
This is Birmingham. I think anyone from Birmingham or Wolverhampton will not appreciate that, but I'm going to do it anyway. "Why do you need to call your mum?" I asked. This time the girl spoke. "You must let us in. Our mother will be very worried." I felt my hand going for the door. I was terrified. In my subconscious, I knew what they were exactly, but I was almost like I was in a trance. I was oblivious to my dog going crazy behind me when all of a sudden, he did something that he's never done before. He bit me in the back of the leg.
Oh?
He bit me so hard that it drew blood. I snapped out of it then. I immediately pulled away from the door. The 2 came to the window and stared at me. Their eyes were completely black. This time they spoke together. "You wanted to speak to us last night, but we couldn't catch up with you. You must let us in. It won't take long." I remember grabbing my dog and running up the stairs. The knocking continued all night. It was getting louder and louder and more furious as the night went.
And that's just someone having a wank in the bush.
Yeah, I immediately called Sam and Becky and told them what had happened. They told me that the same thing had happened to them too, but they couldn't snap out of it. They'd let them in.
Oh dear.
I asked them what had happened. They said the kids walked around the house for a bit and then they left. They said that the whole time they were there, they also felt this immense sense of terror and doom. We never did upload the video to YouTube. Doing so just made it feel like if we'd done that, it would have been inviting them to come back. A few weeks later, I got a message from Sam's brother. Him and Becky had been involved in a car accident. They'd been driving near Cannock Chase when they lost control of the car and wrapped it round a tree. They did not make it. And this is like a true thing.
Fuck.
I have no way of telling for sure whether them letting the black-eyed children into their house was the cause for this, but the fact that they did and that they died near Cannock Chase and I didn't makes me think that if I had let them in, I would be dead too. I still get nightmares of them. I still sometimes worry that they're going to stand outside my door one day and ask me to let them in. I wake up in the middle of the night screaming, terrified. I spend hours at night debating whether to take a peek outside the window, because if I do and they're there, they may see me. But the thought of not looking is equally terrifying, because what if they're there just waiting patiently, waiting for me to slip up? Well, I won't, do you hear me? I won't. I've taken precautions now. I've gotten myself some more dogs. Lots of dogs. It's a house full of dogs. Because if one of them can stop me from opening the door, maybe half a dozen will scare them off for good. And I never leave the house without them. They follow me everywhere. Some people think that I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy. I'm just being safe because they're not going to get me. I promise, I swear, they're not going to get me.
That's horrible.
That woman filmed one of the black-eyed children. Bestie, do you believe in the paranormal? Imagine encountering something that doesn't seem human. Nobody really knows what these things are. From my research, people are calling these things aliens, demons, or just lost spirits. They're said to be pale with dead black eyes, and they show up at your doorsteps late at night or just be wandering in the woods. BTW, if these things ever show up at your doorstep, be sure not to let them in. There was a girl named Lucy who lived in the countryside with her family. One day, Lucy's family went out and she was home alone. A group of children started knocking the door, telling her to let them in. She noticed the kids had pale black eyes, so she definitely did not let them in. By the time she went to call the police, they were gone. Until this day, nobody actually knew what happened to those kids. If you guys want to see me do this on live stream tonight, then heart this video and follow my account.
This creepy footage was posted on social media. Watch the kid in the mirror.
Ambil anak. Ambil cepat, ambil.
The child's reflection freezes for a moment and his eyes turn black, before returning to normal. Is this just an elaborate prank or footage of some kind of demon child?
Did you know that the legend of the black-eyed children started after multiple people reported seeing little girls with completely black eyes in Cannock Chase, which is the area where serial unaliver Raymond Morris abducted several of his victims? An 18-year-old woman made the first report in 1982 when she was hanging out in Cannock Chase with some friends, partying and having a good time, when she said she heard a little girl screaming for help. She said she saw a little girl around 6 to 8 years old running toward the woods screaming, "Help, mommy, help." She chased after her but eventually lost her as she got to the woods. The police were called, but they never found the little girl. When Raymond Morris passed away in 2014, there was a rash of sighting of black-eyed girls in the area. One man reported, "On Saturday the 13th of September, my wife and I were walking through Cannock Chase with our dog. Once we had entered the woodland and the road was no longer visible, we started to hear the giggling noise of a little girl. To our amazement, a child no taller than 1 meter in height appeared as if out of nowhere further up the path in front of us. We stopped dead in our tracks after noticing her eyes had no color. Her head was tilted to the side in much the same way it would appear if she had been hung. She stared at us for a few minutes before running away into a densely grouped area of trees. My wife wanted to follow her, but I was having none of it." Another woman recalled, "Around 2 months ago, my daughter and I were walking through the area when we heard the screams of a young child. I couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl, but they definitely seemed in distress and sounded very close to us, so we instantly started running toward the noise. We couldn't find the child anywhere, and so stopped to catch our breath. That's when I turned around and saw a girl stood behind me, no more than 10 years old, with her hands over her eyes like she was waiting for a birthday cake. I asked her if she was okay, and if she had been the one screaming. Then she put her arms down by her side and opened her eyes, which is when I saw they were completely black, no iris, no white, nothing. I jumped back and grabbed my daughter, and when I looked again, the child was gone. It was strange, really. I knew something was going to happen even before it did. I just had a weird feeling." And yet another mother was looking through the photos of her children in Cannock Chase in 2014 when she spotted the, quote, ghostly figure of a child in a Victorian dress standing to the left of a tree where her children were climbing. We were on a family walk one afternoon and the kids decided to climb a tree. I stopped to take a photo, but it wasn't until I got home that I spotted a child's face looking back at me. Plenty of other people claim to have caught footage or photos of what they all say are little girls under the age of 10 with completely black eyes. So what do you think? Are these the victims of Raymond Morris doomed to haunt these woods forever?
Okay, so let's talk about them black-eyed children bastards. Do not let them in your house. So most sightings of them are typically seen around rural areas, but they have been seen everywhere. And the way that they get you, they'll come to your house in the middle of the night. They'll knock on the door and ask if they can come in. My golden rule: if you cannot see their eyes, do not trust them. They'll make sure that they're not making eye contact with you, so you cannot see their eyes. But if you let them in your house, you're fucked. They are equivalent to defective Motivite. If you had perfect health, you can throw that out the window. If you have plants, they're going to die. If you have cats, they're going to die. Don't get me started with the elderly people. The goal is they want you to feel sorry for them so they can get in your house, get in your energy. Boy and girl. They'll be in your presence for about 15 minutes until a mystery car comes to pick them up, or spaceship.
Story time of the time that I encountered a black-eyed child. If this is the type of content that you're into, feel free to follow along. I post a scary story every single day. And for reference, I did share the story a while back when I had like 2 followers. I figured I would go ahead and reshare it now. This happened when I lived in Georgia. It was late at night. I was up watching a movie when I heard somebody knocking on my door. For whatever reason, my gut instinct told me not to open it. 1, it's creepy for anyone to be coming to my door so late at night. But 2, I just had this gut-wrenching feeling that something was off. I ended up getting up from the couch and I got near the door trying to figure out who was out there. And before I could even open my mouth, the person standing behind the door knew I was standing there and said, "Hi ma'am, I'm just here selling some magazine subscriptions. Can you please let me in?" I was a bit startled at first because how would he even know that I was standing there? I was definitely quiet. So I kind of peeked through the peephole and I saw that it was like a boy about to be maybe 12, 13 years old. He was wearing a hoodie. He was just kind of standing there. I decided to ignore him. He continued to knock on my door and start saying, "Please ma'am, if you would just let me borrow a corner of your table so we can talk about these magazine subscriptions." And I'm just like, no. And he's just knocking and knocking and knocking until he gives up. He turns around and he goes right across where my neighbor lives. I hear when he knocks on her door and she opens it. The minute she opens the door, I hear the boy say whatever it was he was gonna say to her, and all I hear is her scream, say, "Honey," like calling to like her husband, and then she just slams the door shut. Right after that, it was complete silent. I didn't hear anything else. The next morning at like 7 a.m., my neighbor came knocking on my door. I looked out and I saw that it was her, so I opened it and she was freaked out. And she begins to ask me if a boy had been at my door the night before. So I explained to her and I said, yes, somebody knocked on my door and I saw when he knocked on your door. She then goes to tell me that when she opened the door and he started to talk to her, she saw that his eyes were completely blacked out. Like even the white parts were completely blacked out, and she got this gut-wrenching feeling that her first instinct was to yell for her husband, and she slammed the door shut. That was one of the first times that I had ever even heard about the black-eyed kids. And once I did more research, I found out what happens if you open the door. So black-eyed kids bring death. They bring chaos. They bring sickness. They bring loss of money, loss of income, loss of job. They just bring the worst of the worst. Thankfully, she did not allow him into the house, but she did answer the door. So unfortunately, it cost her marriage. Like her and her husband ended up breaking up. It was a horrible divorce. She lost everything. Like everything just horrible. So word of advice, if you ever hear a knock at the door, don't answer it.
Alright, so actually after seeing the black-eyed children in Haiti when I was younger, I never saw them again. I actually didn't even know they were called black-eyed children. I didn't know what it was when I saw it. I just knew when I came here, they were talking about the black-eyed children, and I put 2 and 2 together and it made sense. So I remember one morning, very early morning. So I used to live in a town called Okap Haitian, so Lembe, more like Lembe. So Okap is the second capital of Haiti, and Lembe is like a smaller town near Okap. So my family is from Lembe, so there is this huge marché. It's like a market where people would go sell stuff. So my aunt that day, she was selling things. So there's like a huge cathedral, a big church. You have to pass the church to get to the market, but before you get to the market, there's a morgue on like the left-hand side. I don't know if anybody in the comment section will probably know what I'm talking about. So anyway, so I went to the market. That day it was around like 10 a.m.-ish. I went to the market, then I met my aunt there, and I was supposed to pick some stuff from her. So I went to go bring her mangoes. It was mango season. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was mango season, so I went to go bring her the mangoes that we collected that morning, because usually like we collect mango and go sell them at the market. So I went to go bring her the mango. She was already selling other stuff like meat, fish, chicken, all that stuff, right? So when I got there, she had purchased some coffee from the vendor that was next to her. So she had some leftover coffee and milk with some bread. So because it was so early, I hadn't had breakfast yet. So she gave me that to drink. So I took the coffee and I had it. Whatever she had left over, I took it and I gave her the mango. And then I told her that I had to go back home because I had other things to do anyways. I wasn't planning on staying at the market. So I passed the morgue and I'm walking my way towards the church because you have to get past the morgue, past the church, and then I'll get to like the part where I'll, take the road to go home. All this is on foot. So I'm not like there's no car or anything. All of this is on foot. So after I passed the morgue, as I'm getting towards the church, the big cathedral church that it's called Saint Qapital of Haiti or something like that. I don't remember. I was very young. So anyway, so while I'm walking by myself. I'm just, just enjoying the day, just walking and stuff. And I saw this little girl. She said, "Hey, can I walk with you?" And I'm like, well, sure. I mean, I guess if we're going to the same place, you could walk with me. But for some reason, something about her was very, very strange. And I could not put my finger on it until like her head was down. Like she's coming to me and asking the question, but her head is down at the same time. She never looked up at me. So then while I said sure, and she started walking with me, we're in the same direction. Now we just passed the morgue. We're about to reach the church. Then I felt like my head was getting really, really big. Like the energy shift. My head was heavy. Like it felt heavy, almost like I could not breathe. And afterwards, as soon as we get towards like the church area, I fainted. Like I could not, I saw black and I just fainted. And from there on, I don't know what happened. Only like a few hours later, I would say that it was like around like, I'd say 10 by this point when we were walking. Cause I got to the store, like to the market around like 10:30, I'd say around 11 when it all happened. But I can't really pinpoint exactly the exact time. But I know it's between 10 and 11. I fainted and I did not wake up until maybe 6 p.m. And when I woke up, I was home. I was sleeping on the floor, like on a mat on the floor. I cannot tell you where the time went. Like I literally fainted. I don't remember getting home. I don't know how I got home. I know maybe someone who must have saw me and knew who I was and called my aunt and found someone to take me to the house. But trust me, I could not remember a thing. From the time I told the little girl that she could walk with me, and by the time we passed the morgue, got close to the church, I fainted. Like I almost like I don't even remember like if it was because of her I fainted or if it was because of the coffee I drank that I fainted. I don't know. But all I knew is as soon as she started walking with me, I felt different. Like my head was getting bigger almost. Like it felt like everything was heavy. I could not really breathe. Like I was breathing before. I couldn't really breathe properly. My head was feeling a lot bigger and everything just kind of the air in the entire place just kind of sucked up. Like I could not breathe. And the little girl was there. I could not see her eyes. She just walked with me. She was answering like I'm talking, making small talk as kids do, And I'm talking to her. She's responding back to me, but she never looked up at me. So I never even knew what the girl's face looked like, but I knew that she was not normal. That girl was not normal because as soon as I started walking with her, I started feeling differently and then I fainted. From there on, I didn't wake up until like 6 p.m. I didn't even ask like what happened. I just knew that I didn't feel well. I saw dark. I fainted. I woke up at home. I don't know. Till this day, I can't even explain to you exactly what happened. I just knew that day was so freaky. That little girl, I never saw her again. But from just listening to those stories, I can feel the energy, everything just come back to me. Like, this is what happened to me. I knew it was one of those black-eyed children because what else could it have possibly been? Maybe it was a zombie or something because I did walk past the morgue, but I walk past that morgue every single day. It was like the way to get to the market. There are other ways. I think you can go on the other side, a whole other side of the town to get to the same place, but that place, if you pass by that one, there's a morgue there. And then if you walk further down, there's a big cathedral church, which right in front of the church is always like a bunch of homeless people sitting by the church, and people who are into like voodoo and stuff like that, they will go by the church and light candles and all that stuff. But I know that the energy shift as soon as that girl started walking with me, and then she just disappeared. Maybe she didn't diss me. Maybe she just continued walking after I fainted. But why the fuck would I faint? You know what I mean? It's just like it's weird. Anyways, guys, that's my little story on black-eyed children. I didn't even know there were black-eyed children in Haiti, but I do know for sure that they are here in America. I've never encountered any of them ever since that day, but I do know for sure. You know, when you don't know, you can't pinpoint on what it is, but as soon as you hear the story of something that you experienced, you know that this was the experience you had because it just feels different. It feels weird. Well, that's how I felt like once I heard about the black-eyed children, I had that feeling. I was like, this is weird. This is how I felt. This is what it was. It's, I don't know, guys. Weird as hell. Anyway, talk to you guys.